My husband was smirking the entire time he signed the divorce settlement, but his smirk vanished when the judge read the final statement of my assets aloud. He went completely still, trembling from head to toe. It all began on a Tuesday that felt just like any other Tuesday. The sun was doing its usual thing over Austin, Texas, baking the pavement and making the air thick and sweet with the smell of jasmine from my neighbor's yard. I was in my happy place, my sanctuary, the converted attic space above our garage. The air up there was a mix of sawdust, craft paint, and the faint, clean smell of glue. My world was a miniature one. On my workbench sat a tiny, perfect replica of a Victorian fainting couch, its velvet upholstery no bigger than my thumb. I was just applying the last touch of gold leaf to one of its tiny carved legs with a brush made of 3 bristles. This was my thing, my little hobby, as my husband, Mark, called it. Mark. Even then, thinking his name brought a complicated flutter to my chest. We had been married for 12 years. We had a beautiful son, Leo, who was 9. We had a sprawling 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, the kind with manicured lawns and friendly neighborhood barbecues. From the outside, we were the American dream. Mark was a senior financial consultant, handsome, confident, always dressed in sharp suits that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. He was the provider, the one who made the big decisions, and I was the supportive wife, the one who kept the house immaculate, who volunteered at Leo's school, who made sure Mark's shirts were always perfectly pressed. And in my spare time, I made tiny furniture. That afternoon, my phone buzzed on the workbench, rattling against a small jar of miniature doorknobs. It was Mark. "Hey, hun, listen. Something's come up. Major client dinner. I'm not going to be able to make it home to help with Leo's history project. You got it, right?" His voice was smooth but hurried. "Of course," I said, my eyes still focused on the tiny couch leg. "Don't worry about a thing. Is everything okay?" Yeah, just corporate stuff. You know how it is. Jessica from the marketing department really pulled a rabbit out of a hat for us, so we're taking the whole team out to celebrate. I'll be late. Don't wait up." Jessica. The name registered, but only vaguely. She was newer at his firm. He'd mentioned her once or twice. Young, ambitious, smart. "Okay, honey, have a good time. Drive safe." "Will do. Love you." "Love you too," I said, but he had already hung up. I set my phone down and looked around my little workshop. It was the one place in the house that was entirely mine. Mark never came up here. He'd poked his head in once when I first set it up, a bemused smile on his face. "Whatever keeps you busy, babe," he'd said, before heading back downstairs to his world of stock portfolios and conference calls. He never understood the hours I poured into it, the sheer joy I got from creating a perfect 1/12th scale world. To him, it was a cute, childish pastime. He had no idea it was also my secret, my escape, and, as it would turn out, my salvation. That night, after I put a very grumpy Leo to bed, his diorama of the Alamo was not going well, I sat in the quiet living room, the silence of the big house pressing in on me. It was a feeling I'd been having a lot lately, a strange sense of being alone, even when I wasn't. I shook it off. He's just busy, I told myself. He's working hard for us. It was the same thing I'd been telling myself for months. But that night, for the first time, the words felt hollow, like tiny, empty rooms in one of my dollhouses. The slow burn started with the small things, the little inconsistencies that you try to ignore. You tell yourself you're being paranoid, that you're tired, that you're misinterpreting things. A month after that client dinner, I was sorting through our mail and opened the credit card statement. We had a joint account for household expenses. I usually just paid the balance without looking too closely, but a charge from a place called the Gilded Orchid caught my eye. $450. I'd never heard of it. I Googled it. It was one of those incredibly fancy New Age restaurants downtown, the kind with a 6-month waiting list and menus that didn't list prices. I frowned. Mark had never mentioned going there. When I asked him about it later that evening, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Oh, that. Yeah, a client thing. Had to impress the new guys from the Denver office." He said it so casually, so dismissively, but he wouldn't meet my eye. A tiny cold knot formed in my stomach. Why wouldn't he have mentioned it before? We used to share everything about our days. Now, his work life felt like a locked box. Then came his phone. It used to lie on the kitchen counter, on his nightstand, anywhere. Suddenly, it was always in his pocket. It was face down on his desk. It was angled away from me when he texted. One night I woke up around 2 a.m. and the bed beside me was empty. I found him in the living room, silhouetted by the blue glow of his phone screen. The moment he heard my footsteps, he flinched and quickly locked the screen, his body going tense. "Couldn't sleep," he mumbled, his voice rough. "Just checking emails from the London office." But there was a look on his face in that split second before he saw me, a small, private smile. It wasn't a work smile. I knew every one of his smiles. This one was different. It wasn't for me. The cold knot in my stomach grew, sending icy tendrils through my veins. I started noticing other things. He started working out more, buying new, more fashionable clothes. He swapped his classic woodsy cologne for something sharper, more modern. When I hugged him, his suits felt different, a little stiffer, as if holding back. One time, I leaned in to kiss him when he got home from work, and I smelled something, a faint, floral scent. It wasn't my perfume. It wasn't the soap we used. It was sweet, like lilies. "You smell nice," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He pulled back slightly. "Must be from someone at the office. The air's full of perfume there." He walked away to change, and I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding a slow, heavy drumbeat of dread. The real shift happened during our son's 10th birthday. I had spent weeks planning the perfect party, a big backyard bash with a bouncy house and a magician. Mark had promised to be there, to be 100% present. He was, for about an hour. He posed for a few pictures, laughed with the other dads, and then I saw him, standing off to the side, furiously tapping on his phone. The happy, engaged father from 30 minutes ago was gone. His face was a mask of concentration, and when he finally looked up and caught my eye, his expression wasn't apologetic. It was irritated, as if I was the one interrupting something important. Later that night, after the last of the parents had collected their sugar-fueled children, and Leo was in bed surrounded by new Lego sets, I found a gift bag tucked behind a chair in the living room. It was from Jessica. It was a ridiculously expensive-looking remote-controlled drone, far too extravagant for a colleague's son. Inside the card, her handwriting was a loopy, confident script. "To Leo, can't wait to hear all about your flying adventures. Best, Jessica." And underneath, a little smiley face. I felt a surge of something hot and sharp, like acid. It was too familiar, too personal. "Mark," I said, holding up the card. My voice was trembling slightly. "Don't you think this is a little much from a coworker?" He glanced at it, unfazed. "Jessica's just generous. She loves kids. Don't make it weird, Sarah." Don't make it weird. That was his new favorite phrase. Every time I questioned something, every time my intuition screamed at me that something was wrong, he'd shut me down with those 4 words. I was the one making it weird. I was the one being insecure. I was the one who needed to relax. He was a master at it. He could twist reality until I was the one apologizing, feeling foolish for my suspicions. Through all of this, my attic workshop became my haven. While my life downstairs felt like it was slowly cracking apart, up there, I was in complete control. My little business, which I'd started on a whim years ago, had quietly, miraculously bloomed. I ran it all under a pseudonym, the Tiny Tutor. I had an Etsy shop, but most of my work was private commissions now. Collectors from New York, London, Tokyo. They'd email me with requests for a miniature replica of their grandfather's roll-top desk or a tiny, functional grand piano. They paid thousands, sometimes tens of thousands for a full room box. All the money went into a separate business account under my LLC, an account Mark knew nothing about. It was my secret world, my secret success. At first, I kept it secret because I was afraid he'd mock it, or worse, try to take it over, to manage it, to make it his success. But as the months of suspicion wore on, it became something else. It became my escape plan. I would sit there, sanding a piece of wood the size of a grain of rice, and I would watch the balance of my secret account climb. It was a tangible measure of my own worth, a silent rebuttal to the man downstairs who made me feel small and foolish. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Mark was supposedly on a 2-day business trip to Dallas. He'd called that morning, his voice sounding distant and crackly. "Signal's terrible out here in the conference center," he'd said. I was cleaning out his closet, getting rid of some of his old clothes to donate, when a small, glossy pamphlet fell out of his coat pocket. It was for a spa resort, a romantic-looking place in the hill country, famous for its couples massages and private cabins. It was nowhere near Dallas. My hands went cold. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This was it. This was the piece that didn't fit. The one he couldn't explain away with a client dinner or a generous colleague. I went to our home office computer. We shared it, but he mostly used his work laptop. His personal email was still logged in. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a trapped bird wanting out. I told myself not to look. It was a violation of his privacy. But I knew I was already past that point. I typed Jessica into the search bar. My world ended. There they were, dozens of emails, hundreds, pet names. "I miss you. I can't wait to see you." And the most recent one, sent 2 days ago from her account. The subject line was, "Our weekend," and the body of the email read, "I have the confirmation. The cabin with the private hot tub is all ours. I've already packed. Can't believe we're finally getting a whole weekend. I'll just die if this Dallas conference cover story doesn't work. See you Friday. All my love, Jay." I didn't cry, I just went still. The humming of the refrigerator seemed deafening. The sunlight streaming through the window felt like an accusation. Everything. The beautiful house, the 12 years of memories, the life I had so carefully built, it was all a lie. A stage set. And I was the fool who didn't know the play was over. I picked up my phone and called my old college friend, the one who had become a sharp, take-no-prisoners family lawyer in downtown Austin. "Hey, Emily," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I need to book an appointment. It's about a divorce." He came home on Saturday afternoon, tan and relaxed, bearing a small, thoughtless gift for me, a keychain from the Dallas airport. He walked in smiling, ready to play the part of the returning husband. He found me in the living room, surrounded by boxes. His smile faltered. What's all this?" he asked, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I didn't get up. I just looked at him, really looked at him, a complete stranger. "Half of it is yours," I said, my voice flat. "I suggest you start packing. I want you out of my house." The confusion on his face curdled into anger, then into his familiar, condescending smirk. "Sarah, what is this? Did you miss me so much you decided to redecorate? Stop being so dramatic." "I know about the resort, Mark," I said quietly. "I know about the cabin with the hot tub. I know about Jessica." The smirk vanished. For a split second, I saw raw panic in his eyes, the terror of being caught. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a cold, hard mask. He didn't deny it. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just sighed, a long-suffering sound, as if I were a tedious problem he finally had to deal with. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You know what? I'm glad. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending. This," he gestured around the beautiful living room, "this whole thing? It hasn't been working for a long time. I was just trying to spare your feelings." The divorce was ugly, not in a screaming, plate-throwing way, but in a quiet, soul-crushing, bureaucratic way. Mark hired a slick, aggressive lawyer. They moved quickly, trying to overwhelm me. His narrative was clear. He was the magnanimous husband, gracefully leaving a broken marriage. He was the breadwinner, and I was the dependent, stay-at-home wife with a little hobby. His first offer was an insult wrapped in the language of generosity. I could have the house, but I'd have to take over the considerable mortgage payments. He'd pay a modest amount of child support for Leo and a pittance of alimony for 2 years, just enough time for me to get back on my feet. He was essentially offering to let me keep the cage as long as I paid for it. His friends, and even some of my own family members, wooed by his story of a man who had simply fallen out of love, called me. They told me I was being unreasonable, that I should take the offer, that I was lucky he was being so civil. I met with my lawyer Emily in her sleek downtown office. I laid his offer on her glass desk. She read it and scoffed. "He thinks you're a pushover, Sarah." I took a deep breath. "He doesn't know everything." And then I told her. I told her about the tiny tutor. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my business account. I showed her the commission records, the international wire transfers, the balance sheet from my LLC. I showed her the articles written about my work in niche collector magazines. I showed her the numbers. Emily's eyes, which were already sharp, widened. A slow smile spread across her face. "Oh, Sarah," she said, leaning back in her leather chair, "this isn't a divorce. This is a business dissolution, and you, my dear, are the majority shareholder." The day came to sign the final settlement. We were in a sterile conference room at the courthouse, the air smelling of old paper and bitter coffee. Mark was there with his lawyer. He looked fantastic. He was wearing a new suit, a bold tie, and that smug, confident smirk was firmly in place. He looked like a man who had won. He kept glancing at me, his eyes full of a mixture of pity and triumph. He thought he was free, and that he'd gotten away cheap. He signed his copies of the settlement with a flourish, the pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. He slid them across the table. His smirk never wavered. He was enjoying this. Then it was time for the judge to read the final statement of assets for the record before signing off. It was a formality, but a necessary one. The judge, a stern-looking woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, put on her glasses. She read through Mark's assets first, his salary, his 401k, his stocks. It was an impressive list, and I could see Mark puff out his chest slightly. Then she turned the page. "And for the petitioner, Mrs. Sarah Miller," the judge began, her voice a monotone drone. "Personal savings, negligible. Now, for the assets held by her privately registered limited liability company, the Tiny Tutor, which, according to the submitted and verified financial disclosures, are to be treated as her sole and separate property acquired during the marriage." She paused, adjusting her glasses. Mark was still smirking, looking at his lawyer as if to say, "Can we get this over with?" The judge continued, "With a current valuation of liquid assets and intellectual property totaling $1,742,551. The room went silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. Mark's smirk didn't just vanish. It was wiped clean from his face, like a drawing erased from a whiteboard. His head, which had been cocked confidently, snapped straight. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty gray pallor. His eyes, wide with disbelief, slowly, mechanically turned to me. He went completely still. I watched as a tremor started in his hand, the one resting on the table next to his fancy pen. It was a tiny vibration at first, then it grew, traveling up his arm, into his shoulder, until his entire body was trembling. He was trembling from head to toe.